Welcome back to the Happy Saver podcast. I'm Ruth, a personal finance blogger here in gorgeous Aotearoa. Now, have you ever wondered about other people and their money? Well, I sure did, so I decided to talk to them. And in this podcast, I chat with a diverse bunch of just regular people. I learn their stories about their financial experiences, and then I share helpful, relatable information from Kiwis who just generously explain how they handle their pūtea or their money in New Zealand. Emily and I first met over email and via one of my Phone a Friend chats back in 2023. Like me, she loves regional Aotearoa and everything it has to offer. She is happily ensconced in the Tauranui community, population about 5,000, which is about the same as my town, and she has exactly the right attitude to thrive in a small town. She gets stuck in, she makes things happen and helps out whenever needed. She owns a tiny house on rented land and works a variety of jobs. And from a young age, Emily decided that financial independence was essential to her. Since the age of 19, she has stood on her own 2 feet financially, and she told me that doing so is essential to her well-being. She has never been a high earner, but she has paid her own way regardless. More recently, she has invested time in her financial education, and that has led her to investing her money too. She's focused on living a vibrant life today while also planning for a secure future. Through listening to this podcast, Emily has particularly loved and feels heartfelt gratitude towards the women she has heard from who are just doing their own thing. And by sharing her own journey today, she hopes to be the catalyst that inspires others to take control of their money and build a life they absolutely love, as she has. Now, before I jump into Emily's story, a message from today's fabulous sponsor. Have you ever wanted to save for a big goal, like a holiday or an expensive purchase? Having the discipline to save for a goal reduces stress and allows for the fulfillment of meaningful experiences and desires without resorting to debt. Pocketsmith is ideal to help you save up for big-ticket items such as a holiday. You begin by creating the habit of regularly setting aside money, and Pocketsmith helps you track your progress towards your goal using customizable budgeting tools, cash flow forecasts, and saving trackers, enabling you to set and manage specific financial targets efficiently. I always have a number of different goals on the go, and Pocketsmith helps me keep track of them all. If you want to supercharge your finances with Pocketsmith, have we got a deal for you. Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. Today, Emily is 45 years old and was raised in the community she still lives in by hardworking parents, and she is one of 4 kids. Her dad taught her that saving money is a good thing, that money doesn't grow on trees, and that money comes from mahi. He also believed that getting ahead involves taking on a mortgage to buy land. He saw endlessly paying off that mortgage as normal, even if it meant you might never have much spending money. Her mum was both a farmer and an artist, creative and always making beautiful presents for them. But she never wanted to be in charge of the family finances, despite often being heard to complain that there wasn't enough money in the budget for groceries. Emily's parents, who divorced when she was about 30, have always told her not to expect any inheritance, and her overall takeaway about money growing up was that money was a source of stress. Family finances also felt fraught, particularly around koha. There was a strong emphasis on generosity in her whānau, but it wasn't always gentle. It often felt competitive and stressful, almost like keeping score, and Emily remembers her mum and her aunties arguing over who would give money to whom. There was the sense and understanding that everything had to be fair, and there was a constant need to both give and receive in equal measure, what she called a kind of aggressive generosity. That dynamic has lingered even now. Emily's mum insists on paying for lunch, no matter how much Emily protests, and Emily is still teaching herself to graciously accept generosity without feeling uncomfortable, because in her head, there's still a quiet calculation happening. If someone buys her lunch, she immediately starts working out what she can give back. There's an internal ledger ticking over. What have I received and what do I now owe? She explained koha as an exchange of energy and maintaining balance over time. Yet interestingly, when Emily gives, whether it's money, time, or produce, she gives freely and openly without expecting anything back. She's generous by nature. It's the receiving that feels complicated. She developed a view that you shouldn't rely on others for money, otherwise they have power and control over you, and she knows this is something that she's still very much working on. These days she's connected with the financial independence community, and she said something that really stood out to me, because people in that community no longer need to exchange their time for money. They become people who want to give back without expecting anything in return, and she finds that really refreshing. Now, all 6 of them, her family, lived on a farm close to town. Farming taught her to be resourceful and developed her love of plants and horticulture. But as for doing farming as a career, no way. The whole "you have to have debt to farm" idea put her right off. When her parents divorced, her dad kept the farm, which he now leases out. He still has a mortgage and still says he doesn't have enough money, but he would never consider selling off any of the farm to become mortgage-free or increase his spending money. Now, it is frustrating for Emily to watch, particularly as he is getting older, and I'm sure many children of farming families can relate to this. But at the end of the day, it's his land, she said, and he can do what he wants. It is also on this land that her tiny home is now located. Like many who grew up in Aotearoa, the good old school banking system sparked Emily's interest in saving money. She received pocket money that matched her age, earned through working around the house and the farm. For birthdays and Christmas, she got $20 from her grandparents, and she remembers her granddad dreaming up jobs that he could pay her for, despite her mum's very vocal insistence that family help family and no payment is required. Well, Granddad won that argument, and at that time Emily remembers that she saved the money for one of her greatest passions, which was Lego. A life hack was that they were not a shopping for fun kind of whānau. Fun was playing with mates and making up games. They didn't feel the need then, and she certainly doesn't feel the need now, to keep up with the Joneses by spending money on stuff. She went to her local high school, was self-motivated to study, and she also took on a number of jobs as the years progressed. And that ability to juggle many different tasks and roles continues to this day. Partly personality, she's really bubbly and always on the go, and partly the realities of small town life where it's rare to have only one role. From the age of 13, she worked at the town library for 3 hours every second weekend, earning $9 an hour. She babysat at least once a week. She gardened for 3 customers and learned a lot about horticulture. She spent 1 season picking raspberries. The money was low, but she had plenty of spare time, so was happy to do it. She picked up work at Mitre 10, and as school neared its end, she applied for tertiary scholarships too. If she'd had her way, she would have left school at the age of 15. She found it a bit of a waste of time, she said, but she was self-motivated to work and raring to go. But she also wanted to get to university, something she'd seen her older sister do, to get an education and a chance at a better paid job. She can't recall all the details, but she knows she understood what education cost, having followed her sister's progress. She also knows her instinct was to avoid debt, because for her, debt equaled stress and never having enough spending money. So, in 1999, she followed her sister and headed to Massey University in Palmerston North. Emily studied a Bachelor of Applied Science, majoring in landscape management. It was a 3-year degree, but she loved the lifestyle and the learning environment so much that she actually stayed on for an honours year, which extended her time at university, but she didn't complete that year or that qualification. She was also becoming aware that pay in horticulture was low, so she tweaked her qualifications. She cross-credited units, diverted to Waikato Institute of Technology, and earned a postgrad certificate in science specialising in arboriculture. Of her time studying, she said she passed all papers but didn't apply herself as hard as she could. She worked out what uni required and she pretty much just got by, she said. These days, she said, she would really apply herself. While studying, she cobbled together money in all sorts of ways. Gardening jobs at $9 an hour cash, fruit feed supplies at $12 an hour, a summer holiday job at the Sports Turf Institute that carried on as a cleaning job during the year, and some holidays back at Mitre 10 in her hometown. In total, she earned $10,000 of scholarships over the 4 years, and she applied for everything and won many small ones that all added up. Some years she qualified for student allowance too. Now, as with most tertiary students, she cobbled together an income. We're seeing this very thing right now with our daughter in her first year at Otago University. It's a mix of scholarships, saved money from working, and in our case, Johnny and I chipping in as well. And given the cost of studying now sits at around $30,000 to $35,000 a year once you factor in accommodation and those course costs, it's no small undertaking for young people starting out. Now, I was reflecting on the thought that being a broke student is labelled as character building, but really, many of them are going into debt to pay for necessities such as food, accommodation, and of course, education. Debt that they will spend the next decade or two paying off. Now, in my experience, it's only after study finishes and they take on other life events that they feel the full pressure, the stress, and the anxiety of this debt. Now, just a thought, if you're someone who feels naturally generous and wants to support people in your community but isn't sure how, you might consider helping a local tertiary student through a small scholarship or just quietly supporting a tertiary student you know by giving them a weekly cash allowance. Most young adults are doing their absolute best to build a future, and a little financial support can really ease the pressure more than you might imagine. It doesn't have to be huge, but a small, consistent amount helps. Emily kept her costs as low as possible and took out no student loans in her first couple of years. Her desire to avoid debt was stronger because until 2006, student loans, of course, incurred interest from the day you took them out. She didn't want to spend years or decades paying it back. Others, my own dad included, said, "Don't worry, take it to the grave," but she knew that she could live simply and pay cash, avoiding future headaches. In her first year, she used savings sparingly, and her parents might have paid for half of her hall costs, about $10,000 in today's money, which was all they could afford. She went home a lot and worked in the holidays, but she remembers finishing each week with only a few dollars to spare. Now, some people call that character building, but in reality, living on the poverty line and making ends meet is a huge and very real stress for many students. She shared a car with her sister, with a fuel card paid by their parents actually, but used it very sparingly, walking or biking and lugging her gear around town to avoid those car running costs. Her days were full, study she enjoyed and work that she enjoyed too, 7 days a week. It made her really efficient with her time, and in the first years, entertainment was literally window shopping. Only near the end did she save up for a $400 stereo and treat herself to a CD every couple of weeks. Now, despite wanting to avoid a student loan and having done so up until this date, in her final year, she took out a student loan of $9,000 and she put that money towards a car, an emotionally driven purchase she now classifies as one of her dumbest money decisions. She still remembers physically handing over the cash to the car yard. Cars depreciate, cost money to maintain, and they eventually go to zero. A cheaper car would have done the trick, but she felt like a rock star in this relatively flash car. She said it was a visual representation of success. By the dawn of 2004, she had the qualifications to get a job, and she proved her dad wrong, showing that money can grow on trees after all, when she worked for a tree pruning company. Now, using that income, it took her a full year to pay off the car loan. Now, the car wasn't catastrophic to her wealth, but it went against her prior behaviour. Instead of rebuilding her depleted cash reserves in her first working year, roughly a third of her take-home pay went to a stupid car loan. Now, if you're listening and you want to celebrate, buy a cake, not a car. A golden rule is you don't borrow money to buy things that go down in value. In her first year out of study, she worked part-time for Treescape, plus she took on a lawn mowing job and a cleaning job. Emily is a very hard worker, and I saw that throughout our kōrero. In 2004, having paid off the car and now 24 years old, she decided to buy a house bus, as you do. She had paid rent for years and had fallen madly in love, so why not buy a home on wheels that they could share and they could both avoid paying rent? Plus, she worked around the region, so taking her home with her would make life easier and be pretty enjoyable. With no ability to pay cash, she found a willing mortgage broker, her name was Helen, who got her a mortgage on a house bus of $32,000. That was enough to buy a $28,000 bus and kit it out. Although she was buying it with her boyfriend, Helen insisted she wasn't asking what they could both afford, she was asking what Emily could afford alone. It was hard to get bank approval, and after negotiations, she signed with a higher interest rate because banks don't like lending on vehicles, and perhaps not couples in love either, and she took on an interest rate of 8%. She got her heavy traffic license, she needed it for trucks at work anyway, and she drove the 9-metre bus back to Taumarunui and began turning it into a home. Now, Helen, the debt salesperson, had seen a thing or two before because within a month, Emily's boyfriend said, well, I actually can't afford this, and it would take Emily 3 years to pay it off. Now, I want to pause here and acknowledge that managing money is really a straight line. Most people start with good intentions, they save, they avoid debt, and they try to make wise decisions, but life happens. Opportunities come along, emotions get involved, comparison creeps in, and we drift away from what works. Sometimes we ignore our gut instinct too. Sometimes we tell ourselves, just this once won't matter, and that's often how debt enters. And the tricky thing about debt is that once regular payments become normal, it becomes easier to justify the next decision that includes borrowing. And that is how cycles form, not because people are reckless, but because the baseline shifts a bit. If you want financial success that's really going to last, you can't keep wandering into debt and explaining it away. Long-term wealth is built on steady, good habits, not borrowing against your future self. And the longer the cycle runs, the harder it is to break. Sometimes it takes decades. Particularly with mortgages, it absolutely takes decades, which is why it's important to stay aligned with your intentions and be honest when you start drifting. While the bus was being fixed, they moved into a dingy Hamilton flat, paying just $45 a week, which strangely included milk as a flat bonus. I've never heard that one before. She worked away a lot with her company and received a staying away allowance. She recalls earning about $11 an hour in 2005, which is about $24 today, which is just above minimum wage. And when her pay arrived, the very first thing she did was pay the bus loan. She also saved in the sense of delayed spending. That is, she put money aside only to spend it on something later. But investing? No, she wasn't even aware of it. After years of frugality, she still walked or biked more than she drove. She grocery shopped on a budget and she bought in bulk. And with the basics of budgeting down, she did let a little lifestyle creep in, some fun but cheap nights out and occasional new clothing instead of secondhand. She paid cash for all the work done on the bus, and she even managed to save up $1,000, which was a lot when you earn just $11 an hour, to buy a purple couch, an impulse purchase again, she said, but one which she still owns today. But the problem was that Emily was spending all the money she earned. Even if she saved some, it would eventually find a way to be spent. She moved to Tauranga and stayed there between 2006 through to 2008, working as an arborist for a large company, then into less enjoyable hedge trimming work, and for the very first time, she actually didn't enjoy her job, and her boyfriend said, just leave, but she still had debts and bills, so she didn't feel she could. But her sister pointed out that she had transferable skills, which are abilities and strengths that you develop in one job, study area or life experience that can be applied effectively in a different role. And with her sister's support, Emily applied for a park ranger role looking after the coast and harbour area at Tauranga City Council. Now, this was a complete career change and a huge jump in income. It fit her interest and skill set, and it was her first salaried position of $52,000 a year. Now, KiwiSaver started in 2007, but she didn't join. She didn't even know it existed. She was given a large budget to manage at work and was chuffed that they trusted her. No one asked whether she could manage money, it was just assumed, and she also had a great team to work with. and she immediately started saving, this time for her OE. Now, once again, good at saving, but still no thought of investing to create future income. She was paying higher rent now and still paying money towards getting the bus fixed, and I had to ask, what was the point of the bus if she still couldn't live in it? Well, the work was done in people's spare time, which always takes longer, and the piece-by-piece refurb actually suited her because she could cash flow it. But finally, a year and a half after buying it, she did move in. After 3.5 years of going out together, she and the boyfriend broke up, and she paid him back the tiny amount he'd put into the bus, and they both moved on. In 2008, now aged 28, she sold her fancy $9,000 car to a friend for $4,000. Proving that cars only go down in value, she jumped on a plane with her best friend and she left Aotearoa to travel. She went woofing, which is willing workers on organic farms, I think it is, and couch surfing, leaving her bus parked in a friend's driveway. But the friend she was travelling with needed to return home, and Emily realised that she didn't like travelling alone. She was running out of money. She didn't want to stay in London doing a crappy job while flatting with 10 other Kiwis. So after 5 months, she came home too. She described herself as someone who likes to check things out for herself, but London wasn't for her. She loved the people, she loved the couch surfing and being in people's homes, but she connects deeply with landscape, and she missed it. Plus, she was about to become an auntie and she wanted to be around for that. Now, I'm a bit like Emily. I love travelling, but I love being at home too. And over time, Johnny and I found that we don't need months or years away, weeks or a month will do. Now, at least Emily had a home to come back to in 2009, the bus. And she moved into it and she drove it back to Taumarunui, only to face the coldest winter in history. Her califont froze, her aloe vera plant died. It was pretty rough, she said. But she was absorbed back into her community and picked up full-time work at Mitre 10, and they suggested that she join KiwiSaver. But she was a bit sceptical of a government-run scheme, but the manager insisted, and she reluctantly joined, choosing the worst option, a conservative fund. Who knows what the fees were back then? Most of us weren't even thinking about that. Today she cringes at this lost opportunity. So, for those new to the workforce, learn from Emily. If you're young, you can go into a high-growth, low-fee, passively managed KiwiSaver. What's low fee? Think anything less than 0.5%. Now, if you go to my website, I often talk about KiwiSaver, so you can learn more there. Now, Emily bought a cheap second-hand car too, and in hindsight, since she only stayed away 5 months, she would have kept the fancy car. But momentum was building. Housing sorted, jobs sorted, and she began paying into an investment for the very first time via KiwiSaver. And then life got pretty busy. She picked up all sorts of work. She pushed the transferable skills envelope and she worked as a health coach for a local social services agency on a 1-year contract, campaigning for community gardens and healthy eating and activity. She applied for a high school groundskeeper job and she was qualified for it, but they turned her down, but then became involved in their agricultural program instead. She picked up part-time work at a gemstone shop on minimum wage, but she got to study an interest area for free. Her first job, where she really followed her heart, she said. But the pay was low, so she also drove buses 2 days a week, worked in a guided canoe trip business on weekends during summer, and also did pruning work in winter. Whew, she is one busy lady. Now, she went on to sell her cheap car. She borrowed money from a friend and paid it back over 12 months and bought an old Hilux for 11 grand. Today it has, wait for it, 475,000 kilometres on the clock and is worth slightly more. Proving me wrong, not all cars go down in value, but I am sticking to my guns here because the vast majority do. During this time, she was full of energy and enthusiasm, and as a single woman without kids, she only had to look after herself. Everything was going well, except for winter in the bus. It was parked on her dad's farm for free, but too cold, so she started house-sitting over winter. What began as a practical solution to her winter problems became what she calls an accommodation hack. 1 year, she actually house-sat for 8 months straight, bouncing between warm homes and seeing different parts of the region. She enjoyed the variety. For the first time in years, she was actually even seeing power bills again, not that she had to pay them, a reminder of how low cost her bus lifestyle had been. She really charged them to stay in their homes, usually no money changed hands at all. The only exception was a regular client 20 minutes south of where she actually worked, and she did ask for petrol money because of that distance. Otherwise, it came back to Koha. In exchange, she provided reliable care and they provided a warm home. Now, over time, she built up repeat clients, and to avoid exhaustion and that constant moving, she actually made a rule that she would do a minimum 1 month per sit. This gave her more stability with less upheaval, and sometimes she even took her bus with her. But I know what you're thinking. Ruth, Emily still seems to be living pay to pay, still borrowing money for vehicles. Where are we going with all of this? Well, just sit tight, we are getting there. In 2015, now aged 35, she moved to Hastings and she got a job at Bostocks, which is a massive apple orchard apparently. Great experience working as a quality controller, then tree training, then pruning. She loves moving around for work, and the degree she earned in her 20s opened doors to a variety of opportunities. But up till now, she seemed to be working to live, which works while it works, but if the money stops, well, so does life. It felt normal to her to not have much. She kept the bus and the ute on the road, she biked a lot, she ate cheaply, she kept costs low. She chose this life and she really enjoyed it. But a chink of light appeared around this time. She remembers having only $3,000 cash to her name, and it made her reflect on the importance of a rainy day buffer. And by now, she was over living in the bus. Even in summer, it wasn't 100% comfortable. Between 2016 and 2018, she worked a cleaning job for a short-term rental company earning $25 an hour. She drove buses casually, and then, through a friend of a friend, she actually got full-time work driving for Top Deck. Basically, she got paid to drive a coachload of enthusiastic young tourists around New Zealand for 18 days at a time, and she earned $150 per day, plus food and accommodation were covered, plus a tax-free cash commission. For every activity a tourist booked, she got a small cut, and on a good run, she could earn another $1,000 cash. And she made a rule: save as much as possible, spend as little as possible, with a very clear goal. She wanted to build a tiny house to replace the bus. One exception was that she donated part of her income to Wingspan Birds of Prey Trust in Rotorua, where she's a life member. And in my experience, it's often people with the least to spare who give the most, and her open-handed generosity is really refreshing to hear about. Now, in her late 30s, she became much better at setting a savings goal, focusing and following through. And while travelling with Top Deck, she decided to have the tiny home built for her. She bought materials piece by piece, trailer, timber, fixtures and what have you, buying the next component when she'd saved enough. But nothing happened quickly, much like the house bus. The build began in 2018 and it ran through to 2020. She did have a builder lined up, but her dad insisted that he wanted to build it, and he teamed up with a family friend, a local builder, and suddenly Emily had two 70-year-olds building her home on her dad's property. Her father wouldn't charge her for his time, and his mate charged just $35 an hour. The build ran at the speed of their labour and her cash flow. But this is where I sensed a shift. Emily costed everything because she wanted full visibility. Even with free dad labour and mates rates, the 17-metre square tiny home cost $130,000, and she had kept the notes to prove it. During the build, she kept travelling for work and stayed with her dad and her stepmum between trips. Eventually it was finished and she moved in. She placed it on the same spot her bus had stood, on her dad's land, and now pays just $20 per week in rent, something she's really grateful for. Now, Emily is well aware that accommodation is the biggest cost for most people. She feels incredibly fortunate to have been able to minimise this expense. She's got solar panels and uses gas for hot water and cooking, refilling the bottle every couple of months for around $45. Her ongoing annual living costs are remarkably low, just $28,000 in total per year. So she now has a warm, dry, comfortable, albeit tiny, home. She's got low expenses and what sounds like a fun job too. But it was during the build that a new work idea began to take shape. I think that COVID and the closure of tourism would have pushed this change as well. While dropping off recycling at the local transfer station, she had an epiphany that she needed to work there. If you haven't worked it out by now, Emily follows her heart or heads in any direction that looks interesting. Now, while you and I might put that on our long list of things we'll never do, she went to the CEO of the Ruapehu District Council and explained that she wanted to set up a reuse centre alongside the recycling centre. They didn't go for the reuse centre at first, but they did agree to employ her 20 hours a week in waste minimisation. She did that while still mulling the reuse centre idea. And of course, Emily wasn't content with just one job. 20 hours a week wasn't enough. She worked as an EnviroSchools coordinator for 20 hours a month. She drove buses 2 days a week. She added in winter pruning and some plant grafting too. And with all this mahi going on, she began paying attention to KiwiSaver for the very first time. She explained it was only more recently that she understood the difference between risk and volatility in KiwiSaver. A colleague at Top Deck had nudged her, when you start a new job, from the get-go, invest as much as you can directly into your KiwiSaver and you won't miss the money from your paycheck, is what they told her. With her new council job, she took that advice, ticking the 10% contribution box. She adjusted her lifestyle around what landed in her account after investing and started to get the inkling that with housing sorted and steady work, she finally had money available not just to save, but to invest for growth. But she was still in a conservative fund, a poor choice for her age. Now, this is where risk versus volatility matters. Risk is the chance of permanently losing money or failing to reach your goal. Volatility is the normal up and down ride of share markets. Conservative funds tend to have less volatility, but also much lower long-term returns. Spending years in a low-return conservative fund will mean far less KiwiSaver in retirement, full stop. Now, one of the simplest changes you can make is logging into your KiwiSaver and choosing a growth, high growth, or aggressive option, assuming you can tolerate those ups and downs, that volatility. Volatility is the roller coaster. Real risk is missing the destination altogether. Now, Emily kept moving. She did get the reuse centre up and running, part-time at first, and now she's employed full-time as a manager. She said that as a general rule, she gets where she wants to go, and I love that she had an idea for her community and she made it happen. She felt her prior work led the community and council to trust that she was genuine and that she would follow through. Now, around 2023, momentum was building on the personal finance front too. Now, I see this pattern so often. People improve gradually. They stay out of debt, they live within their income, they save up and pay cash and feel they are doing okay. And they are, that is a good, solid foundation. But the missing piece is often understanding how to build an asset that will one day pay you an income. Her partner, Paul, reminded her how close she came to going down a different path. Before she discovered investing, before finding me at the Happy Saver, she had $40,000 sitting in the bank, quote, doing nothing. And she had considered gifting it to her sister to support a venture that she had. Now, Paul gently challenged her. If you invest into someone else's business or property without a legal agreement, you won't get that money back out anytime soon, and it isn't in your best interest. Well, she listened to him, and she's just so pleased that she did. But at that point, she had no plan for that money. Now she knows the logical place for surplus cash is into an investment designed to grow over time. In 2023, at the age of 43, she tuned into personal finance information and stumbled across this very podcast. She was hooked from the start, hearing how just regular Kiwis manage their money. She'd never encountered anything like it, people talking about money openly. She is so grateful to everyone who came before and shared their stories on the Happy Saver because that kōrero normalised talking and thinking about money for her. I can't tell you how happy that makes me when I hear this. Now, she told me that partly thanks to the podcast, she decided it was worth buying a secondhand laptop so that she could create a spreadsheet and track all her money, not just a one-off project. For the first time in her life, she carefully noted what she earned and spent, and she saw the full picture, which she has now tracked for 2 full years. And from there, it snowballed. She listened, she learned, and she took action. She moved her KiwiSaver to a provider that suited her long-term goals. First, she went to Simplicity High Growth, then to InvestNow, where it sits today in a foundation series Total World KiwiSaver fund. A fund like this is volatile. Yes, it owns the biggest global companies whose collective fortunes move up and down, but it has less risk because it's so massively diversified across thousands of companies. She also put legal structures in place. After listening to my episode about the importance of having a will, she won a will through a local fundraiser, a $150 prize. Her will was a bit more complicated than expected, so the cost rose to $300, but they insisted on only charging her $150. Now, old Emily might have argued or tried to repay them somehow, but instead she just graciously accepted it. Now, I remember receiving her email saying how good it felt to have her will sorted. Now, the extra complexity came from wanting to donate her body to science, which is the ultimate in recycling, she joked. And by then, she'd been with her partner Paul for a couple of years. They kept their finances completely separated, which is why you are not hearing much about him, but together they each created a relationship property agreement, which cost Emily an additional $3,000. Now, for the first time, she was building structure around her financial life, giving her the chance to think ahead. And Paul said, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. In 2024, she completed the free 10-plus week online personal finance course run by British couple Alan and Katie Donegan. It's called Rebel Finance School. And Katie points out that over your life, you will earn well over $1 million, and an amount of money that big is worth managing well. So for Emily, she said, mind blown. And finally, she thought big picture and longer term instead of pay to pay. So her education became a culmination of useful pieces. Emails back and forth with me, encouraging her to organise and track, a phone-a-friend chat with me, podcasts where she absorbed tips, and then that Rebel Finance School, which really deepened her investing knowledge. And you can find that free course at rebeldonegans.com. Now, years earlier, Paul had said he thought she was going backwards financially, that she was saving but not investing into assets that grow. And at the time, she disagreed. And later, she said those thoughts came back and she realised when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. For Emily, that teacher appeared in the form of emails, conversations, podcasts, and then Rebel Finance School. She said that if you know about Rebel Finance School, and it's pretty hard not to because I do mention it so often, but it's not for you yet, just check back in 6 months. It took Emily a year to decide to do it. She also said it ties into her Koha journey. The best things in life might just be free. Now, having time to learn at her own pace and seeing the incredible diversity of people and their journeys, it showed her that if any single person puts their mind to something, well, they can do pretty much anything. Emily has always had that energy in other areas of her life. She just finally applied it to her money. Now, the learning didn't stop there, though. In 2024, she also enrolled in the free Rebel Business School course. Around the same time, an email from MB invited people to go in the draw to win a business mentor. And thanks to her new philosophy of taking opportunities, she applied and she won. And she actually received a year of monthly one-on-one sessions. She didn't connect with the first mentor, but then she got a woman called Jenny who has wide experience and looks at things differently, she said. And Emily can ask questions about work, business, and personal direction. Having someone one-on-one to fire ideas at is priceless. She recommends everyone take the opportunity if it appears. Now, she didn't actually finish Rebel Business School because she changed her mind about a venture that she had planned, but what she learned in that short time just blew her mind, and she can revisit it if she wants to. Eventually, she realized that she needed to slow down, pause the learning for a bit, put it into action, and then rest. So When I asked her, where are you going with all of this? It really showed that momentum is building. And as of February 2026, her financial situation is as follows. She owns her own tiny home, value unknown. It's home and she has no plans to move or sell. She has no debt. She earns $59,000 after tax and KiwiSaver contributions, or $1,140 each week. She has another Invest Now Foundation Series Total World Fund, which is not in KiwiSaver, of $188,000. Cash she used to hold in the bank but didn't need got invested, and she now regularly adds to it. In the last 2 years, she has consistently spent just $28,000 per year, which is $540 a week. She didn't save the leftover this time, she invested instead, adding $31,000 in each of those 2 years into that Total World Fund. She contributes 10% of her income plus an employer match of 3% into her Invest Now Foundation Series Total World KiwiSaver Fund, which now has a balance of $113,000. Combined with favourable share market returns, her total investments are now $301,000. Using the 4 to 5% rule of thumb, that could pay her $12,000 to $15,000 per year towards her current $28,000 annual expenses. So she is absolutely on the right track. By keeping her money simple, she's made enormous progress quickly. Tracking shows she has doubled her net worth in 2 years, she said. Her banking is super simple, just 3 bank accounts. She keeps an emergency fund of $6,000 plus around $500 to $1,000 in her everyday checking account, plus a credit card which has a zero balance. These days she invests as much as she can each month. Whatever is left in her check account gets chucked into Invest Now, she said. No overthinking it, she sweeps the surplus into investments and just moves on. At the end of each month, she spends about 10 minutes updating her spreadsheet. She looks backwards, not forwards, because spending is so low and consistent for her. There was actually only a $100 difference between 2 entire years, so she feels confident that she is stable. She's focused on getting $775,000 invested, but without obsessing over doing so. Why that amount, I hear you ask? Well, basically, she has rounded her annual spending up to $30,000 a year. She has multiplied it by 25, which gives her $775,000. Then the math says that once a year you can sell off 4% or $30,000 and your money has a good shot at lasting for the next 30 years. Now, this is a rough guide. It's called the 4% rule, and it's used in the financial independence community to work out how much money you need to have invested to retire. Now, recently her mum has had health issues, which has meant more driving and higher spending, and she's flexible with that. She'll scrimp, but not at the detriment of her well-being or her family. Now, her system remains simple: 3 bank accounts, low balances, investments doing the heavy lifting. Before she started investing properly, she actually had more money sitting idle in the bank, but not anymore. It is working for her instead. Now, being in a secure, stable relationship with Paul has also made a big difference. They've talked about emergency funds and agreed what feels right. Instead of both having $10,000 each, they effectively backstop each other. So she keeps about $6,000 of cash in the bank, which so far feels like enough. She still calls herself a fiercely independent, tough loner of a wahine, but she's comfortable working alongside Paul. She used to focus on buying land, but now she's just not as interested. Paul lives 10 minutes down the road in his own home, and they share their time together. And it's been a huge relief not to feel that she has to buy land. She doesn't want to invest her money in land and tie up all her money when she can see KiwiSaver and Invest Now are working well for her. And if someone gave her $10,000 right now, it would actually go straight into her investments. In the past, it would have gone into a term deposit with poor returns. She doesn't plan to sell investments until retirement, but it's comforting to know that she could. She also did deep belief work about the share market, she said, because at first she feared it and struggled with the idea of its capitalist system, but she reframed it. She'll use capitalism to grow wealth and then use that money to live an intentional life. She spent a lot of time working that out in her own head, and now she feels confident, relaxed, and calm about it. She tells friends about money with excitement, but says, you need to get educated so you understand it and have confidence to do it yourself. She says she invests like a dead person now. She invests the money, forgets about it, except for that monthly tracking to see her wealth rising. Because of where she lives, the supermarket isn't that great, so she'll go to a bigger town and bulk buy, so spending fluctuates a bit, but it stays low consistently. She and Paul go on what they call monthly honeymoons. They're not married and they don't want to marry, but she tracks these costs in a separate spreadsheet column, and she calls him her elderly boyfriend because he's actually 20 years older. And these short, intentional getaways are great for their well-being in their relationship because they're not together all the time. They do as many free things as they can, such as walks, but they enjoy paying for good food, campgrounds, Airbnbs, self-contained cabins, and they go away for just 2 to 3 nights at a time. And their deal is he pays the accommodation, she pays for the food and fuel. At month end, she sees what she spent. Her expenses are offset a bit by how he spoils her, she said. Again, Koha. Now, all around her, she's reminded that wellness and health are most important. She sees people dying young, so she wants to plan for the future while enjoying life today, which I think is incredibly important. They keep money separate, but they talk about money together, which is key for people who don't mingle finances. You can still be open, you can still bounce ideas, and you can still plan as a team. And she hopes that Paul will work on his money more, but she knows it's his journey. As I mentioned earlier, she has sorted her will and they have a relationship property agreement. And if one dies, the other gets everything. And that impacts her decision-making too, she said. Now, as for inheriting from her parents, she doesn't count on it. They've always told her not to, and she takes that seriously. Practically, she might inherit. So occasionally, she plays the idea through, and then she forgets it. She is not relying on inheritance. She really wants to simplify life, which I love, and I've always made it clear that money can be simple. Although she jumped around the motu in earlier years, she's loving staying rooted for now. And one bonus is sticking around long enough to see fruit trees bear fruit, and she bottles enough to see her through to the next season. She grows veggies, she gets venison from a hunting friend, she buys secondhand, she focuses on producing zero waste, and she lives off the land while looking after it too. Now, she recommends for you and I starting with education. Podcasts, including this one, Rebel Finance School, of course. She's listened to The Simple Path to Wealth and Die with Zero, but noticed that she was overloading and has backed off. She dove in, she got what she needed, and now she's implementing. She knows she can return to that education if needed. And I love that she learned enough to take action. Too many people keep turning over rocks for more information when if you sat and thought about it, you probably already know enough to just get started. For now, she's building investments, growing food, nurturing her relationship, and living simply with a calm and confident plan. So righto, before I wrap up, another quick message from today's sponsor. If your finances are holding you back from living the life you want, try Pocketsmith out. They've got the tools to help you make money management easier. And have we got a deal for you? Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. Pretty cool episode, don't you think? The reality for a lot of New Zealanders is that we will follow our dreams and find fulfilling work, but it won't necessarily pay a high income. And I say to my daughter, it's not how much you make that matters, it's what you do with it. Emily earned money in fits and starts, often low income, but sometimes a higher income for shorter bursts. She thrives on a simple life, and that's what makes her happy. The upside was low expenses, but for a long time the mismatch was that she didn't know what to do with the gap that she created. So she did what many do, she just saved it in the bank and eventually spent it on something else, whether that was to cover a break from work or to buy something. The key shift The thought we can insert into that money comes in, money goes out flow is to take a portion and invest it in an asset, the share market, that grows over time. Then, as Emily is now rapidly finding out, the asset you've created can eventually replace your income. More income just lets you be more of who you are and do more of what you love. If you want to work, work. If you want to retire, retire. The point is you've got options. Today she is 45 years old, and for the first time she has a flexible but tangible plan. After working through the Rebel Finance School retirement formula, she could see a possible retirement age of 54 years old. 6 months further along in her journey, she wondered if she could shave it to 52 years old. The higher her income, the more she can invest, and the sooner work becomes optional. Either way, it's not about locking in an exact year. It's just exciting to have an age in mind. Of course, that assumes life continues roughly as it is. Her partner thinks her income might dip, while Emily quietly suspects it could rise. Who knows? And this is the part I want to leave you with. Emily's story shows that you don't need a huge salary, a corporate ladder, or the standard life plan to build financial independence. You can live differently. Smaller town, tiny home, multiple jobs, seasonal work, growing food, swapping produce, house sitting, and choosing community over convenience. And you can still create a future where work becomes optional. The secret isn't perfection, it's intention. It's keeping your costs low enough that you have a gap and then doing something smarter with that gap than letting it sit in the bank or disappear on impulse spending. Emily didn't change who she was to build wealth. She simply matched her money system to the life she genuinely loves. And if you're willing to go about life a little differently too, you might find that your version of financial independence is not only possible, but it's actually far closer than you think. So finally, ngā mihi nui, Emily, for your energy and heart in explaining your situation. Time just flew by in our kōrero, and I really look forward to picking up the phone again one day for an update on where you're at. All the very best to you. Now, we've reached the end, and you know that if you want to get in touch, you can find me over at my blog, thehappysaver.com, where I share a lot of information about how Johnny and I manage money in our life. Plus, if you sign up for my fortnightly email, I'm always linking to other useful personal finance blogs and podcast books and just money-related content in general. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you took a few nuggets of wisdom from this episode that you can now go away and apply to your own life. And please do share the Happy Saver podcast with your friends. It is the best way that people can learn about it. And I would love it if you would talk more about money with your own friends and whānau and just help me continue to help others be better with money. So until next time, happy saving.